Session 1, Rethinking Development from the House to the World.
What surprised you about each other's cultures and communities?
Concerning this gap everybody is talking about between the two cultures and the two people, us being kind of on both sides of the spectrum. But after 2 weeks together, I'm not sure what this gap they're talking about is.
I think all of these points just emphasize the importance of direct contact between cultures, because we can study them in school, but that almost tends to highlight differences. And when you are doing interpersonal contact and hanging out with people and living with people in hotels and traveling with them, that's when the similarities become really obvious.
Why did you want to be an ambassador for your country on this exchange?
It's been a privilege and an honor to go on this trip, participate in this exchange, and have a chance to show sort of the friendly side of the United States and the friendly face of our country, and I've really enjoyed it.
Especially where I come from, where people don't think about educational ways of looking at places. The media gives like an awful view of Islam in general, and I just wanted to come over here and show that not everyone sees Islam in that way, and just better understand it so I can take that back and give other people the ideas that I have come to find out about Saudi Arabia.
Actually, it was the best chance to show and to share between the two countries, culture and economic and education.
How does the media affect our preconceived notions of one another?
I feel that one of the most important parts of our exchange was how the media has portrayed Islam and the Middle East to Americans in a negative way, and how it's really important for us to be ambassadors, and when we go back we can share why the media is not showing the Middle East in the correct light.
I would say that the media definitely over-exaggerates our differences. I think it doesn't actually portray Islam specifically as there being a difference between fundamentalism and piety, between believing in something as a personal conviction or acting in fundamentalist ways or radical ways about it.
How can the public or private sector bridge the gaps between our communities?
Well, I guess that this is the first time ever heard about exchange student program here in Saudi Arabia, and I guess if we want to close this gap, I'd rather ask the JCCI to do more of this kind of program.
When we were in Riyadh, we visited the office of Cisco Systems in Saudi Arabia, and it was amazing, like you said, to see how culture, how the corporate culture of Cisco was able to adopt the culture of Saudi Arabia, and how the corporate culture of Cisco was also impacting Saudi Arabia and making a difference all over the Middle East.
What is the aim of this exchange, and what are the next steps in moving relations between these two countries forward?
I think what's interesting is that these countries are happy to do business with one another, happy to respond to each other politically at all times, but there hasn't actually been a globalization of culture, and so there's not a trade-off from culture to culture, and that's one thing that I just think is missing and needs to be brought along to actually foster a connection between these two countries.
Well, one of the things that I think we're all hoping for is because we've seen alliances between different companies, but we've seen it on the much bigger scale. I would love to see some mergers or alliances between the small companies.
From what we learned is that in Saudi, youth population makes more than 50%. And this program helped us, the youth, to have the opportunity and the experience of learning about different cultures in different parts of the world, and share our experience together to improve and develop our countries to be one of the leading ones for the future.
I came into the program really excited to learn about foreign investment and about energy and about this economic aspect of what the partnership between the two countries, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, have. But I came away learning so much more about things that I hadn't even expected, about Islam, about culture, about what Saudi Arabia values in terms of development. And I think these insights that I have are going to help me bring back a more positive message about this country and about its people.
I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of us, all 22 of us. There's, 14 girls, 8 guys, and saying that this has been an absolutely incredible experience. It's been proven and clear through all of our dialogue, not just today, but throughout the course of the almost 3 weeks, which is amazing. And I think this is owed basically to the private and the public sector for supporting us on this initiative.
This is session 2, real estate, urbanism, mega and hyper projects.
How similar are development strategies or mega projects between the two countries?
Well, the similarity mainly focus on sustainability environmentally wise, and the strategies actually concerning on the economic and urban and educational development. When we visited Research Triangle Park, it was one of the good and great examples about how this park attracted urbanism and real estate development, as well as to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The economic cities will be a big boom and a big step in the kingdom of how they can attract the businessmen and investment to establish their companies and their own society.
I think it's pretty apparent that they are similar in that both countries realize that it is very important to approximate the major elements in success of this development, be it education, government, small business, non-profit organizations, and it's very apparent in both countries, such as Research Triangle Park, King Abdullah Economic City, approximate that to KAUST, and I think both countries realize that this proximity is pretty important.
What impressed me most about the presentation at SAGIA was the promise that these mega projects hold for not only diversifying the economy, but also balancing the country out economically. And by developing new industries, creating more opportunities for young Saudis to get jobs and to have the opportunities that they all deserve.
How can one country learn from the development patterns of the other?
I think our trip to Sagia for me was really illuminating. In terms of development, the major differences I see in the U.S., a lot of development takes a lot of time. There's a lot of red tape and a lot of regulations that have to be followed. What I was amazed at when we went to Sagia was the speed at which these major economic cities are going to be put in place. And I think with that comes a lot of excitement and a lot of jobs, which are really needed in this country.
Well, actually, I think the development strategies between the two countries are actually rather different because the U.S. is finding itself in a time where it has to reinvest its infrastructure, upgrading, its highways, its ports, its airports, whereas Saudi Arabia is at a time where it is, creating, the very basic infrastructure of the country, highways and ports and stuff like that. So it's actually interesting because I think that whereas, Saudi Arabia can learn from what we've done and how we've developed, our system of, commerce and transportation, we can also learn from them, whereas, they have more emphasis on, new technologies such as wireless internet and new utilities.
An example that comes to my mind is when we visited Cisco back in Riyadh, and how they explained that they would help develop and construct the communication system in the King Abdullah Economic City to make it a smart city. And I think that's the step for Saudi Arabia to become a really developed country.
Research Triangle Park, it's a good experience, and I think it's a good example that Saudi Arabia has to learn from this park, because this park, the main thing is establishing a research center that can attract the scientists and businessmen in the region, while the region in the past was like for tobacco industry use and so.
I think coming from the United States, I think commonly we as Americans run the risk, having already vastly developed our country, of feeling entitled to tell other countries exactly what to do, and I feel like it's dangerous. And I in my conversations with the Saudi students and the American students, it's been important for us to temper our sort of preconceived notions of what proper development is. On the other hand, I feel like it's extremely important to look, because as an American I also see the flaws in our system. It is really important for countries that are developing as quick as Saudi Arabia to please examine our development patterns, what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and take advantage of our mistakes and don't make them again.
In session 2, we've had a lot of discussion, not just today, but again over the last few weeks. And I think it's amazing how engaged we are as youth. We're very excited about the development happening in both countries. And one of the questions I guess I posed to the people who are at JEF is, how can we as students get involved?
Session 3, from boom to prosperity.
What type of growth is being promoted in both countries?
I think for Saudi Arabia, we're going through a very rapid pace of growth, and as much as that can be a good thing, it can be also a harmful thing. It can be a double-edged sword.
Well, I know in the U.S., our focus on growth is very much on GDP and overall economic boom. So let's make sure that the economy overall is doing really well. And I think Saudi Arabia has this incredible opportunity not only to start off looking at GDP and to start off looking at overall economic growth, but to focus on each individual in the country. And I think Saudi is doing an amazing job starting that already.
I think that growth in human capital is one of the most important things that each country has to invest in. So I think that both education and technological innovation are going to be very important in improving this human capital and making it so both countries grow, economic growth and also just cultural growth.
Is sustainable development a private sector or a public sector issue?
I'm going to have to say that sustainable development is an issue for both private and public sectors. Just how SAGIA was introduced to put guidelines for private, for foreign investors and private sectors to help backing up the government itself.
I think that development is not just the responsibility for the private or public sector. I think it goes beyond that. I think it's the responsibility for each and every individual in the society.
I agree with my colleagues, and from what we've seen, that there's been a lot of great philanthropy and a lot of investment from a lot of the oil companies into a lot of social sector areas. But I also have a question, I guess, in how development within both countries can use that as part of their development project.
How is the private sector translating wealth into sustainable development in each country?
I think private sector institutions have a very big effect on the social change in the country. For example, what we visited in Riyadh Kingdom Foundation, what we learned is that it's a non-profit organization that actually provides charity and help for other poor people around the kingdom.
Microfinance is a great way to empower men and women, and we've seen its success around the world. And so, in light of the cause of our esteemed speaker, Muhammad Yunus, I would ask, how could we integrate microfinance in Saudi Arabia?
Chevron Oil, I was impressed by their commitment to shift from an energy company, from an oil industry into an energy industry, and the amount of efforts and capital that they're trying to input in that. As well, we can, there's also the Raytheon, which they have this commitment towards our country, not only to increase our military defense systems, but to also add jobs and increase in the technical factors and the human capital here in Saudi.
How are private sector institutions affecting social or environmental change in both countries, and how should they improve their impact?
I know that one of the most exciting discussions we had as a group that got a lot of people awake and ready to participate was the potential social changes that could come about with the development of the economic cities.
Well, I was amazed by the level of commitment from the companies that we've met in the States and here in Saudi Arabia for their social contribution programs, and that they're not just treating them and giving away ad hoc financial support, but actually getting into the design of the program.
The idea of the private sector providing public good for society is not a new concept. And what we're seeing now with the venture philanthropy of CEOs of large corporations leveraging huge funds to create immense social good is an amazing concept, but it's a trend that's spreading fast. With Richard Branson in the audience, and with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as others, I think we're seeing what the private sector can do for society.
As a great oil producer for the world, Aramco has a great also contribution to the society as to community service. The way they have pre-college institution just to educate the students who graduate from the school and prepare them for the colleges and universities. I think this is a great contribution for the world.
Well, a recap, session 3. We've talked about the importance of private and public sectors cooperating, and where it's not necessarily either the private or the public to invest back into the country, but it's often a combination of the two. And when those areas of interest, overlap, that's often the best way to develop a country.
Session 4, Alliances of Horses and Forces.
Between the two countries, what are the differences of thought concerning the future of energy?
I don't think actually there are differences as much as there are similarities between the two countries.
Both countries are looking for other resources rather than the petrol, such as electric power generation and transportation and human energy.
Well, talking about the role of oil in our economy, I say it is the major revenue we have. We don't have the diversification of incomes and revenues. So this is a main question we should ask. Why don't we have other income?
I think something that's really important for both countries is the dependency on oil and how both countries are trying to separate themselves from that dependency, and how America is worried about their dependency on Saudi Arabia's oil, and how Saudi Arabia is worried about how their dependency on oil is going to affect their economy in the future.
I think one of the most interesting things that I've seen in Saudi Arabia, as opposed to the U.S., is the view of oil into the future. In the U.S., we're entering into the potential of a carbon-constrained economy, as well as the prospect of shipping in our oil from other countries around the world and having political instability and economic pressures basically dictate our energy supply.
What is the present role of energy between these two countries, and how will this relationship change in the future?
One of the things that's become clear to me on this trip is that that relationship isn't going away anytime soon, and I don't think we should wish it away anytime soon. And there are a lot of people in the United States I know who feel sort of strongly about the United States' relationship with Saudi Arabia. And I guess one of the things that I've come away from this experience with is how comfortable I am with what the Saudis are doing to promote alternative energy and the steps they're taking, and the what a blessing it is for the United States to have a secure supply of oil through Saudi Arabia.
How does each society view its major energy producers?
One of the major differences that I noticed, I think, coming to Saudi Arabia and comparing companies like Exxon and Chevron in the US to Aramco is the popularity of Aramco in this country. It seems like everybody understands that they're responsible for a large degree of growth and stability in this country. People want to go work there. Whereas, you know, where I am in the United States as an energy student, there's a lot of different agreements about what the role of oil producers are in that country.
Among the general public, people are happy to pin climate change on the energy companies, even when every person in the United States is a consumer of energy and is part of the problem.
Can alternative fuels and renewable energy coexist with the conventional oil and gas technology?
I think anyone would be naive to think that we will just leave oil out of our energy equation, oil and natural gas. But on the other hand, I think alternative renewable energies are a must in the future. And I look at oil, especially Saudi Arabian oil, as the key to innovating for the future and basically using that natural capital that you have in this country to leverage immense possibilities in sustainability, in energy security and economic stability far into the future.
In our discussion, we've talked about things that energy companies can do in order to make a note to the general public about how important energy is in every aspect of our lives. And I really want to encourage energy companies who are at the JEF and for all of us to think about two things that oil companies can do. First, for the environment in terms of investing in new energy sources and taking a look at opportunities that are available. For example, in Saudi Arabia, solar energy is an amazing opportunity here. In the U.S., we've started a lot of research and development in alternative forms of energy, and I'd really encourage Saudi Arabia to do the same. And that's one thing Saudi Arabia can learn from the States. And one thing that we Americans can learn from Saudi Arabia is the investment of energy companies into social structures. Aramco has been doing so much for the people in Saudi Arabia, and I'd love to see oil companies in the U.S. really invest and make public that information as well.
Session 5, the double helix of life.
How does each country train its leaders of tomorrow, and how could each country improve?
I believe that this exchange program is actually one of the efficient ways of the educational system. It opened a lot of doors for both of the groups, for the Americans and the Saudi groups of the students. And most important is that we have learned how to think in another perspective about the world. And visiting companies from various fields actually enhanced our thinking skills and abilities.
What are the advantages of the Saudi education system versus the US?
I hope that our universities think about exchange programs, just like these programs, and instead of just making like 2 weeks programs, let's make it for a semester or a year.
Many of us were really impressed with the students' English skills who've come from, various colleges around Saudi Arabia. And I think that, being bilingual is an extremely important skill to have in our globalized world today. And so I think the United States can learn a lot from Saudi Arabia in their emphasis on developing language skills from a young age.
Another advantage that I see for the Saudi education system is everyone has funding. If you go to a public university, it's paid for. And I know coming from a rural area in the States, it's very hard for some of my friends and other students to afford college. And even though there's scholarships and grants out there, it's still amazingly expensive. And there's all kinds of loans when you get out of college. And so that's one major advantage I see from the Saudi education system.
What are the challenges of creating a globalized education system, and what would the benefits be?
Since Saudi is looking forward for its globalized education system, opening public libraries for the society will create a very educated generation who will be the leaders of the future.
What type of educational training is valued in each country?
I have no doubt that the emphasis placed on science and technology and business embodied by KAUST and the Aramco Prep School are definitely important and beneficial to Saudi development. But I couldn't help but notice that there seemed to be a lack of emphasis on the arts and humanities.
It seems to me that since Saudi Arabia does have an unemployment problem, it should work towards kind of providing its students with more options and, similar to the U.S. system in which, there's so many different majors and so many different routes that students can take. And at the same time, this kind of creates the possibility of working towards a more globalized educational system.
I think that there should be more emphasis perhaps in the United States on adapting certain college curriculum to adapt to the new jobs that are in the market. I think that in the Saudi Arabian system there can be certainly some additions of different disciplines maybe outside of the prospective employees' field of work.
One of the concerns for the educational systems here in Saudi is how focused it is. So, I mean, we don't get a chance to explore other fields and other majors when we enter the college. I mean, we're much more tied up to what we choose.
I think it's certainly very understandable the emphasis that Saudi Arabia puts on technical and vocational training and also on science, technology, engineering, business. It seems to me that one of the major problems that Saudi Arabia faces is this huge population boom. And so the number one priority should absolutely be training people to find jobs straight out of college.
Well, for this session, I think we've discussed a very important issue, which is the educational system in both our countries. And we came up with a lot of interesting conclusions. I mean, from our side, we found that your system enables, let's say, extracurricular activities, which can empower students and give them much more capabilities, which will help them in their professional lives later on. And for you guys, you've learned about how our government can financially support students in their studies, and which would affect you guys by enabling more students from the States to attend colleges and universities and get a higher education.
Finally, we conclude with Session 6, Innovative Industries, Making the World of Tomorrow.
How can technology improve lives in each country?
I think technology just can't be an end in of itself. I think the idea is to use technology like a tool, solve problems, but keep your eye on what the actual dilemma is, and use technologies to leverage solutions that can actually bring us to a solution that doesn't just add to more problems.
But I think things like Sadia with its economic cities, what they're going to do is they're going to bring in foreign investment and bring in that technology. And through that technology, that's also going to spur the human development as far as education and bringing new ideas, and making it so maybe in the long term there can actually be a solidification of such a process.
What is more important, profit or employee satisfaction?
I believe that employee satisfaction should come at first, because there wouldn't be any profit without the satisfaction of the employee himself or herself.
Productivity is based on subordinate satisfaction, and I like how Raytheon structured their work process by making teams and work groups, so it will increase cohesiveness and productivity.
Do corporations reinvest profit into innovation?
I think that's important that corporations reinvest their profits back into the company. I think we've seen that throughout this trip. When we visited Cisco, we saw that they were investing their profits in new technologies such as telepresence. And at Aramco, we saw that they were investing their money back into new oil field exploration. And also at Chevron and Exxon, we saw that they were investing at in new alternative renewable energy sources. So I think that overall, one of the key things that we've learned throughout this trip has been that to stay competitive in this world, that you must constantly reinvest your profit back into your company to allow it to remain competitive.
How do technology and innovation affect culture, and how does culture affect innovation?
One of the themes and one of the ideas that really attracted me to Jeff was the importance and the emphasis on including tradition and culture of Saudi Arabia in long-term development. But when we went to Sagia and learned about this huge growth of economic cities, I left wondering what is going to be left of Saudi Arabian culture once huge foreign companies come in and large amounts of emphasis placed on overall growth and overall economics. What is going to happen to the religion and the traditions of the Saudi Arabian people?
I think that innovation affects culture and vice versa. But I really don't fear that innovation could lead to decrease in culture. I think rather than worrying about whether the culture will eventually diminish or decrease, we should worry about how we can use innovation to further express our culture and keep it strong.
How does technology affect the environment, and should this be a consideration?
I think, technology, it can affect the environment, and I think Rethinking companies start to seek for new solutions, how we prevent or how we reduce the technology impact on the environment.
I think that technology can positively impact the environment in Saudi Arabia if a more widespread recycling system is instituted. When we visited corporations, we saw that some of them were able to send their recyclables to recycling centers. And I just think that if recycling centers were more widespread, then this would positively impact the environment all around Saudi Arabia and not just in the private sphere.
After concluding the sixth and final section of our discussion, it has become apparent to us that both technology and innovation are critical elements of the future economies. But we are the leaders of tomorrow. We are the people who are going to be making the changes, the people who are going to be running the corporations and governments in the future. So it is absolutely imperative that both the corporations and governments invest in our futures, invest in technology, invest in innovation, invest in human capital to make it so we have the brightest future possible. They must lead us down the path to success. So we thank the JAF, we thank all of our sponsors for the people who have given us this opportunity to realize our potential and to make it so we can be the leaders of the future.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for helping us these past few weeks. It's been an amazing experience. We learned so much from the companies and about the different cultures. More than that, we've gained friendships that will last forever.
I agree, Megan. And I can't emphasize enough how much we need to publicize this and increase the number of such programs. Thank you.